Hello and welcome. My name is Gina Clarke and I'm the editor-in-chief of the Fintech Times. Today we're talking about unusual career journeys for the fabulous women we have joining me today. And if you want to join in the conversation, you can use the hashtag Fintech Times Unusual Journey. Now, most people in fintech admit that they had never started out looking to carve a career in the industry, but for some women, that journey has had more twists and turns than a whodunit novel. And so in this webinar, we're going to speak to some women who have broken barriers, overcome hurdles, and maybe even crash landed in positions along the way. I'd like to welcome my guests on screen, Ghlea Boskovich, the founder and global ambassador at Femtech Global, Eileen Burbidge, partner at Passion Capital, Joanne Dewar, CEO at GPS, and Marieke Flament, CEO at Mettle. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Gina.
I think it would be really nice to maybe start from the beginning and maybe if we could kind of go around in a bit of a circle and see what position was maybe your first position, and then of course where you are today as well. That would be great. So I'm just going to go left to right on my screen, not to miss anyone out, but Ghlea, you're first.
Yeah. So right out of grad school, I started as a intern, but a regulatory economist intern in public utilities, specifically in telco and electric. And 25 years later, I am a regulatory economist that leads a trade association that lobbies for open banking. So full circle for me.
Always good. Unusual, but very good. Marieke.
Yeah, hi. So I started my career as an IT project manager for LVMH, Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy, the very big luxury goods conglomerate. I started there because I was living at the time in Shanghai. So it was actually more by luck. I was living in Shanghai, studying Chinese, and I just wanted to stay in the country. So honestly, I was looking for any job that would enable me to stay there. And I was lucky enough to find an amazing company and to be able to grow my career from there. My career had many twists and turns, and we can get into that after. But today I'm the CEO of Mettle, which is a digital neobank by NatWest, and we focus on passion economy.
Excellent. And over to Joanne.
Hi, thanks, Gina. So, yeah, Joanne Dewar, and my career started joining the IT graduate development program at Pricewaterhouse at the time. So focused on major sort of systems integrations projects in financial services. I did that for a number of years. I'm currently CEO of an organization called Global Processing Services. We're the technology provider behind a number of challenger banks, digital e-wallet providers in the UK, Europe, and increasingly around the world. So we're doing the heavy lifting that enables our customers to be able to focus on the end customer experiences, such as Starling, Curve, and Revolut. I've also had lots of twists and turns, but I guess the main thing that kind of is quite very different or unique for me is that I've managed to get back into this kind of position, having taken quite a significant period out raising my family, and sort of found my way back in.
Excellent, thank you. And over to Eileen.
Hi there. Thanks so much for having all of us, Gina. I'm taking notes because I'm such a fangirl, actually, of everybody on the call, and I'm loving these origin stories. Mine is probably most similar to Joanne's. So I got out of university and did a sort of an IT management development program as well, but in the telecom sector over in the States. And then I moved into tech from telecoms because that telecoms company moved me to the San Francisco Bay Area in the early 90s, and I fell in love with the tech sector. And so from doing that, I think I got into sort of fintech or financial services, not because of any draw. I'm actually terrible with math in my head. I don't know any Excel macros. I don't have an MBA. I wasn't a sort of a finance person at all, but it's probably through living or wanting to live vicariously through really great entrepreneurs who are pursuing better propositions, better customer outcomes for financial services using technology. And so wanting to back or invest in those types of people is what led me to fintech.
Excellent. Well, quite varied actually, but really good to hear. And those programs sound very interesting. I was also never maths or anything kind of inclined on that side of things. I was purely creative. But I think now, looking back at kind of the last few years, the whirlwind of fintech, I'd be quite interested as well. It's amazing sort of how it's kind of engaged that side of my brain a little bit. And I think we have to maybe address not so much the elephant in the room, but there are specific issues that any woman faces in any type of workplace. And Joanne, you've mentioned kind of bringing up a family as well. But do you think there's been any sort of obstacles or hurdles that you've necessarily had to get through to where you are today? Go back to you on that one, Joanne, because you mentioned family.
Yeah, I think there's hundreds of hurdles, and I think we don't yet have enough sort of visible role models of different ways of working to be able to identify when you are in your sort of late 20s, early 30s, and trying to make those big sort of life career decisions, to actually know fully what options exist. And what I found at the time, and why I'm sort of now wanting to really speak out about it, is even once I'd got back into the workplace, I was kind of quite embarrassed about having taken the time off. And I would, when people said, "Oh, how long have you been at GPS?" and say, "Yeah, I've been here about a year." "Oh, where were you before?" And I wouldn't say I'd been out for 7 years. I'd say, "Oh, well, my prior career was in management consulting," whatever. And I would hide it as if it was a negative. And so that's reinforcing the issue that we're not speaking out to show that these are, those other alternative options are out there. So that's where I've come to just kind of own my story and be proud of it, because actually it's incredibly difficult to find the confidence to get back into workplace when you've taken more than just a sort of set maternity leave out. And I want to be able to share with others that it is a viable route. And I really want to encourage organizations to create returnship programs, because it's too daunting thinking about going straight back to full-time work. But there are an extraordinary number of very capable women out there who've become mums, who have become incredibly bored. They don't necessarily feel that they belong at home, but trying to find some kind of option that works, which isn't a complete downplay. I mean, I was even looking at, what about becoming a receptionist at a doctor's surgery or something, because I'm trying to find something that could fit around school hours and, be able to be done part-time. And it's just such a massive step back. But if we can create returnship programs that enable people to rebuild confidence and build back the hours over time as they find the balance, I think that's super important. So I know there's lots of different aspects to what we want to explore today, but that's one that I'm particularly wanting to highlight.
And I find it interesting as well that a lot of women become CEOs, or Eileen, your partner, and you did that while you were also raising your children. Was it easier to kind of have it on your own terms rather than come back into another company?
Yeah, I do think, I mean, for those of us who have that privilege or that luxury, starting something where you're your own boss is clearly going to give at least this perception of greater flexibility. I would suggest that we probably put more pressure on ourselves than anybody else does. But that perception of, not letting somebody else down, or how you're going to message something to somebody else and whether or not you're meeting someone else's expectations is something that we probably do make even more difficult. But then when it's only answering to yourself, I feel like that made it a little bit easier. But I'm really mindful that, we don't always get that chance. And, if I think about when I was able to do that, I did start my family quite late. And so by the time I started that, I had already been working for, a few decades, several decades, actually, a couple of score even. And so I had that benefit. I do think one thing that's interesting, because I agree with everything that Joanne said, is that in some ways the pandemic has both hurt and I think helped women at work. Obviously, we know, and we've seen now all the data, that it's women who were set back the most because of the pandemic. At the same time, I'm hoping that over time, we see some longer term benefits, because I do think it's normalized the fact that everybody, no matter their gender or their family situation, has a life and has things to look after outside of work, and probably overlapping with working hours. So I'm hoping that over time, that helps to normalize the conversation about balancing those other priorities.
Yeah, totally agree.
And Ghlea, I mean, in terms of fintech itself, what challenges are we looking at, and what are the hurdles at the moment?
For women or for fintech?
Well, women in
now, right? I think that there is as Eileen sort of mentioned, there may be this normalization of a virtual space, and that the flexibility around how we participate, how we produce, how we engage with clients and coworkers and the market itself will change, and it will normalize this, I don't need to be in person. I also think that women are disadvantaged precisely because there is so much emphasis put on face-to-face time and showing up at the office and proving commitment and loyalty, et cetera. When we very much well know that there's always been a motherhood tax and there's always been a fatherhood benefit and an uptick. So I think that we're still trying to navigate that and not penalize those who choose to create families. I myself do not have children. By circumstance of accident and probably planning and just some sort of unconscious, I'm choosing differently. But I still have family obligations that manifest themselves very differently. And I also have those family obligations that spread out over a couple of continents. And I am the one who directs the finance and directs the medical choices, et cetera, et cetera. And that doesn't respect time zone or, my obligations to work or to anyone else. So I think that there is sort of this penalty that we still have to overcome in terms of women being caretakers and women also caretaking the office and being the social calendar managers and all of those sort of preconceived notions about the role of feminine workplace obligations. And yet we haven't really had that frank conversation in context of the pandemic, or at least I haven't been listening to that conversation being had. And I think that we're also suffering from a rash of incredible attacks on women's rights in general. And that makes it even more complicated, irrespective of fintech. I think that we're now actually having that existential crisis of what it looks like to have equity and equality across gender and race. And it's becoming much more stressful. And I think that we compound our own problems by maintaining this imposter syndrome. I know Joanne sort of referred to it in the beginning of being ashamed of making the choice of having a family and choosing to be a mother and then getting back into the professional space. We all suffer from imposter syndrome in one form or another. And I think that's something that we also don't really dig into as to why we feel inferior and why we feel like we should be apologizing for who we are and how we show up, instead of owning our choices and being proud of them. It's an interesting dynamic to go from a young 20-year-old to a 45-year-old in a career, and seeing those moments of shame or inferiority, and having to reconcile who I am myself with my public role or my public persona, and not necessarily public in the grand sense of thing, but how I show up and engage in the workplace. And I think we need to have some frank conversations about the psychology of how we treat ourselves and the lack of patience that we have with ourselves and the lack of kindness that we give everyone else. And we give them great latitude to show up how they choose to, but we don't do that for ourselves. And I think that's actually one of the things that will hinder us in terms of recovery from the pandemic, is not being more proud, not being more convinced and convicted in our own space. And that's irrespective of industry. So just a few thoughts, a little bit random, but
it's good. I mean, they all join up, so it's definitely worthwhile to hear. And Marieke, as well, for your journey, CEO, female CEO at Mettle, how has that been? And have you faced anything in particular?
Yeah, and I think lots of things, right? I would say a couple of things. So number one, I started being CEO when I was just a new mom. So my son was 4 months old when I started that. It took me time to actually decide or figure out if I wanted to be a mom, because I think everything that has been said resonates so much, right? I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and there's like what should we do and how should we do it and what's the right thing and can I do everything? What does it mean to do everything? So I think that's something I personally struggled a lot with, and finding your voice and your purpose. I actually it took me time to figure that out, but then now I have also put it around me like a system in place to help out. And I think actually having people who tell you, yes, you can, right? And so for me, for example, it's been my my husband, with whom I've been since I've been living in China, but having that voice of someone who say, yes, you can, and yes, you can do this, and you can do that. Other hurdles that I had, at some point in my career, I was working for Expedia, and I'd just been promoted in an amazing role, which, was, I thought, the role that I really wanted. And then there was this crypto company who called and who said, hey, we have a role. And I was terrified of joining them. And it looked like an amazing company, but I was like, well, can I really do that? And it looks like really risky. And thanks God I had my husband, because he was like, yeah, go on, do it. What are you risking? So I think having those external voices, because we are our own biggest critic of all the things. I cannot tell you the number of morning where, I wake up and I'm like, can I do that? Am I doing a good job? Like, am I leading this thing in the right direction? Like, the self-doubt is immense. And having those voices, that support network, actually the cheerleaders who are constantly cheering up for you, whether they're like family, friends, partners. But I think that network has been the thing that has helped me through all of my hurdles.
Excellent. I think I don't want to bring in the children analogy, but they say it takes a village to raise a child. And I think we are very isolated with or without the pandemic to start with. And maybe it takes a whole female fintech community to create more females in power.
and to build on what Marieke just said, we've got this, we all carry this huge guilt on the choices that we're making. Either way, whichever way you go, whether you're going for, paid child support, or whether you're sort of taking a sort of back step on your career decisions, or, whatever you're doing, you end up feeling guilty. But plus you've got this real sort of judgmental element, around society-wise, in terms of, being the mum that didn't make it to whatever it happened to be, that was at 2:00 in the afternoon at school, and the school dynamic isn't designed, it's genuinely not designed for working mums. And one of the things that's been, there's lots of, as you say, lots of difficulties from the pandemic, but one of the advantages was things like parents' evening running on Zoom, so you could actually join it from work, and you kind of think, well, I wonder whether they're actually going to keep that bit going, because it meant that you could sort of rock up for the 10 minutes without having to worry about the hour and a half commute to get there and the hour and a half to get back. So there are there's a number of things in society for both men and women that, where we've got so much to learn from the Nordic countries, for example, where they've got some of the sort of support structures and expectations better and more equal for men as well as women, that enable sort of women to be in the workplace more readily, and the expectations and the support structure from of course you're a working mum, and that's brilliant, because you're being the role model for your daughters and ours. And if we don't do that, then we're going to continue to have this kind of inequity. I'm involved in sponsoring the Findexable study on diversity. It's a global study, but I had a very personal example that builds to the ongoing sort of difference in perception, which was my middle daughter's just done her GCSE choices, age 14. The classes are split into girls and boys. 50 of the 100 boys have chosen to IT as an option, 5 of the 80 girls. And, we can't solve for, trying to make sure we're getting a much better balance of gender, in our organizations and in the go forward, if we can't get it right back then. And part of getting it right there is to be able to sort of normalize and explain the career choices and show that there's strong female role models, and actually that's something to aspire to be.
Definitely. And is there something we can highlight? I mean, Eileen, as FinTech ambassador and with a kind of top-down approach, have you seen anything that you're thinking, wow, we need to do more of, or it's a really good option, a really good scheme?
I mean, I think what was already mentioned earlier was making sure that there were more, examples, and sort of, to be able to sort of see these are options, or that this happens, and to normalize it helps a lot. I think so much has been covered, so it's hard to sort of think about specifics. What Joanne was just talking about is really, really close to my heart, because I think it's much, much earlier. I think it's before secondary school, and I think it's actually at primary school. I think it's even before then. I think, even before any of my children could speak, depending on if it was a boy or a girl in the buggy, you'd get comments like, isn't her hair really pretty, or isn't that a really nice dress? And for the boys, and they're not even talking yet, it's like, oh, they're going to be a great footballer, or they're actually going to do something. Whereas, the girls were just sitting back looking cute or pretty. And I think it's just so early, and there's such subtle cues from society and just conditioning in general that I think, there's a lot the schools can do to address it. I think, speaking in schools, and there's lots of programs that do invite, professional people from all sorts of industries and all sectors to speak at schools. And I think that's a fantastic, type of program to support. There are programs that support, women coming back to work, which was talked about earlier as well. Even here in London, there's, returning to work sort of programs and schemes. And so I just think it's all of the above and more still needed. But, even having this webinar and pulling, all of us together and having, people that are tuning in and just having the conversation is so much more than was happening 3 years ago, 5 years ago, and, of course, even 10 years ago. So I think we're making very, very slow progress, and I'm hoping that it continues to get better.
Excellent. And Marieke as well, have you got any plans for Mettle to embrace more female-led, or what would you suggest as a top-down approach?
Yeah, well, I think it's really diversity and inclusion, right? And we've been working with an external consultant actually, who's called Toby Milden, who's been fantastic, because helping us really reassess and look at things and just take a step back, right? And I think beyond just gender diversity, for me it's all about inclusion, and ultimately the products we build, if we really want to build them for everybody, then you need everybody to be building them, right? Otherwise, the thing that I still see day in, day out is the biases, right? The bias that we have, and the thing that, we unconsciously think about. And how many times as women, we are looked at or thought that, oh, it's finance, you don't really get that, or this is really techie, sorry, you don't really get that. I mean, I'm sure women on this call have been in places where it's like, sorry if I'm being a bit too technical, should I help you understand? I'm a computer science engineer, so I can't help but feel a bit offended by that. But that's the reality of perception, right? So to me, it's a couple of things actually. Data, I think, are extremely important, and what we find is actually finding ways so that employees are comfortable sharing their data, right? Sharing who they are, who they truly are, so that you can actually get an understanding of that. I think data around salary are really important. Early on in my career, I still to this day, and I'll remember till the end of my career, I remember one day understanding that a male peer of mine was making 25% more than I was. And that was a shock. And I learned so much from that. But I think that is anchored in my mind in terms of how do we make sure that we don't get ripped off, right? And how do we make sure that we actually help the broader thing being pictured? So data is super important. Training, I think you don't, sometimes it's really unconscious again, right? Getting on calls where people say, hi, gents, no, that's not okay. That's just not okay. But that training of what is it and what it means, and what are the impacts of the words of what you're saying. Role models has been mentioned. I think it's super important, and linking to that, sometimes we are also, appearing as super women, I think is actually not a good thing. I think it's more how can we genuinely show that we also have our struggles, and we wake up and we have our doubts, and we're not really sure, and we're also trying to figure it out. But actually by showing that, I think we help others also have the strength to say, oh, I don't need to be a super thing. No, you don't. You don't need to be a super thing. And the programs that have been mentioned, I think are fantastic, right? How can we find programs? I remember when I was in engineering school, I landed there, we were less than 10% women. My first thought was, I need to get out of here. I need to find another career because I just don't fit. And thanks God I sticked with it. But, how can we find so that it fits, and that we can encourage more women at every stages, from learning to actually growing up to then making a career. Yeah.
Absolutely.
If I can just build on what you just mentioned, I read a fantastic book over Christmas. called The Great Man is Dead by Rob Cross. And it focuses on the fact that, in any sort of leadership training, you start off by saying, right, think of a leader you aspire to be like, and most of the time people will mention someone like Barack Obama, and it tends to be that sort of great orator, and from the minute you've chosen that person, you feel you can never really live up to that. And what this book focuses on is that the real qualities of leadership need to focus on authenticity, purpose, and passion. And if you can get those three things right, then then that's what actually your employees and your organization needs. And so it connects to what you're saying in terms of pretending that anyone is a superhero is not opening any doors or enabling anyone else to think that any of it's accessible. So actually sort of revealing more of yourself, including those vulnerabilities, is actually long-term a much more powerful thing. And I think as more of us as females are becoming CEOs or senior leaders, and can do so and express vulnerability and authenticity, as opposed to, there's the more sort of traditional bank, sort of maybe sort of 10 years or so ahead of us as a cohort, who, they've made it up the chain the hard way, but they've become so hardened as a result that their way of survival in the system was to not express any sort of chinks in their armor, which, it's great that they're there and they've made achievements in their own right. But I think actually starting to sort of create some different examples and actually showing some, vulnerabilities and some of the choices that we've made and some of the guilt that we've felt and some of the compromises that we've made over time, it makes the whole thing more accessible for others.
Absolutely. I mean, hands up if you've ever had imposter syndrome.
Oh God, yeah. I've deliberately got one of our company values is courage, and I put that there partly to remind myself as well that you do need to have courage, whether it's to, I had to take myself on a journey on doing public speaking 2 years ago. I wouldn't have said I could do this webinar even. But equally, when to again Marieke's point in terms of asking for a pay rise or a training course or career development or whatever, we tend as a gender to sort of sit back a bit more and expect that our hard work will be rewarded. And one of the things I try and teach myself to do, or I have done in sort of certain key moments, and what I encourage other people to do, is think of the alpha male that whether in your workplace environment or outside, and how would they approach a pay review discussion, a performance review, or a training request, and see if you can bring out that kind of courage just for that moment of the conversation. It's not changing who you are, but sometimes if you don't ask, then you'll never get.
I think actually we're all here today. We're all women who are in, I don't want to say surprising positions, because it's an industry that is dominated by men. You can't get away from that. And of course, I guess it's our job to put down a rope ladder, and let the next ones come up with us. And to that extent, just to finish the webinar, I could really keep this going for a long time, but maybe we could all just leave with a final sentence of what women who may be watching this could or should do to get where you all are today, I imagine. So any last words of advice? Marieke, should we start with you?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna say with find your support network, and actually identify these people that when you're not sure, when you're full of self-doubt, are here for you, and they're saying, yes, girl, yes, you can. I think that's the most crucial thing. And these people are all around you, but map them and then go to them for different things. But yeah, find your support network.
Excellent. And Ghlea?
You don't have to be in tech to be in fintech. So don't put that hurdle in front of yourself. It's an artificial one. If you're curious, if you're interested, find a way in. It can be through sales, it can be business development, it can be HR, it can be policy, it can be any number of things. Don't let an absence of tech expertise get in your way. And that goes for any other industry that you happen to be curious about. There is, if you want in, there is a way in. Just don't tie yourself to what it should look like, because should is limiting.
Joanne.
So I always think about the analogy of sailing. If you know anything about sailing, you can't sail directly into the wind. You actually have to tack and navigate in order to be able to move forwards. And I think that that's what I actually sort of apply in this sense of being able to make progress. I think unlike Ghlea, I've never worked for a woman. I would love to have had that experience. So when you're working in a sort of primarily male environment, you need to I don't want to sort of ignore or sort of suppress my femininity, and I absolutely want to put the ladder down for others, but sometimes you need to tack, but you don't lose the sense of who you are and where you're going, but sometimes you need to tack back and forth in order to make the journey forwards, and then you leave the ladder for everyone else.
I like it. And finally, Eileen.
Yeah, so many great things have already been said, so it's easy to go last and say what everybody else said, but I guess to sum it up, I would say hopefully that this group and this kind of conversation has highlighted that it's not one size fits all, and there's all different pathways, and that it's very individual for people, and that if anyone wants to and is willing to back themselves, so I would just say back yourself all the time, and obviously with the support networks and with mentors and with everything else that we've talked about, and with Joanne's there, progress is always moving forward. It doesn't have to be in a straight line, but just back yourself, and you'll find a way through, and our examples show that it's not always a straight line, and that every step is progress. And think of everything that happens, even if it's not what was planned or not the originally desired outcome, that is progress, and that is a step and an investment towards something else. And so it's always progress, and it's always good, and it's always an opportunity to learn and to contribute.
I love that. Every step is progress. I feel like we should burn the live, laugh, loves on the signs and have every step is progress instead. Brilliant. Well, thank you everybody for joining me today. And I know we could have gone on for a lot longer, but I appreciate you coming on, and hopefully we'll be doing some more things with you soon and highlighting more women in fintech, because I think for us at the Fintech Times, it's a big issue. So glad to have you on the call. Excellent. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.